to the jungle, to a wild place where strange, unpredictable things happen, such as we have a talk scheduled for Ubuntu server security, which a lot of you said, oh yeah, I want that. So you come here for that, and then you find out, wait a minute, where is that guy? The guy who was going to speak. Well, he has a backup speaker because everything here is very well planned, right? Well, that's good. The backup speaker's there. All he has to do is get the backup speaker, get the notes in. Oh, wait a minute, the notes were never posted. Wait a minute, where's the backup speaker? He's in London. So we don't really have the talk on Ubuntu security that we wanted, though we had a plan A and a plan B. We are now in plan C. That said, what we do have is a remarkable plan C. We have not one, not two, but 15 members from Canonical and the community who can answer almost anything you have. And if they can't answer it, they will make it up on the spot. So, Q&A. I'm going to take this mic around for you guys. You ask anything you want, preferably Ubuntu related. And I'll kick things off. I have a question for Kyle.
However,
yes.
Security focus for those of you who feel ripped off now, maybe we should start off before you bail, asking a security question, and maybe between all 15 of us will be able to give you a not dumb answer.
Yeah, we'll do. And I have a security question of my own, which is one reason. It's the only reason I'm at UbuCon this year. I made up a whole talk just so I could be here, so I could ask this question of the speaker who isn't here, but Kyle's going to help out. And the question is, I get an Ubuntu server, I install it, I want to do some things to tighten it up a little bit. What would be maybe the first 5 things I would do after a fresh install to make my system a little more secure?
Okay. Is this on? Is this thing on? I can just yell. Okay, sure, well, of course. Oh, goodness. Okay, so let's see. I mean, if you're just talking about a bare bones install and you're not enabling AppArmor yet, or you're one of those things where it kind of complains a little bit, so I'm going to disable it, resist the urge to do like the typical SE Linux thing, which is to just turn it off and, because it's complicated. So for the most part, at least, most of the rules are fairly simple, so I would at least try to turn it on and get it working if you put things at weird locations. Sometimes, like I've noticed Bind, for instance, even out of the box, sometimes it wants to put things in weird locations depending on how you do your config. So that's first thing. Me, generally, these days, I'm really concerned with how I handle secrets on systems, because every system, I'm doing a lot of stuff in the cloud nowadays, which like pretty much every system's untrusted. You're on an untrusted network. Everything's untrusted. There's a hacker next door and all this crazy stuff. So another big thing I'm really concerned about is how I handle secrets. So I've sort of taken to a model of, as much as possible, especially in cloud instances, generating secrets on the host instead of having them stored somewhere centrally. Then I have to worry about that. So if we're talking about, for example, GPG keys, you use whatever configuration management tool that you use to try to generate secrets on the host as you need them. In general, also, it's hard to escape having applications that have passwords in plain text somewhere on the system. A lot of people that want to use the database often have to end up having a plain text password somewhere. Awful, but what are you going to do? When that has to happen, I like to keep it on RAM disk. So, DevSHEM, everyone can write to it. It's a nice RAM disk. It's not huge by default, but it's big enough. So we wrap it in our configuration management system, so we don't really have to think about it. But essentially, all it does is I say, I want this particular file to be secure, and instead of it being under etc whatever, there's a symlink under etc whatever that points to the sort of like a SHA file name under DevSHEM that represents the actual file. Why do we do that? So the actual file never touches disk. The secret's not on disk. It's in RAM disk. No one can see it. They shouldn't be able to see it. But the idea is I'm trying to store as few secrets as possible in plain text on the file system. Other than that, disk encryption is really good because you want to protect yourself against, the person that's buying your server off of eBay, 3 years from now if you didn't remember to shred it. Or in the case of the cloud, you better hope that your cloud provider is really good about shredding your disk, and maybe they pinky swear that they do it, but you don't know that for sure, right? And is that good enough for people who are depending on the secret, depending on how secret it is? So disk encryption, if you can automate that even better. We've taken a point of when we use ephemeral disks, for instance, since it's ephemeral anyway, and since we don't count on any particular storage mechanism always being there, when we use Lux, we encrypt it with a randomly generated key. Again, this is an automated sort of thing. The moment we mount it, we generate out of a randomized key that we don't even know. it exists in RAM, I guess, technically. But if we turn off the machine and turn it back on, the disk's ephemeral, and so the storage is gone too. So even we, unless we started to do fancy RAM scrubbing, couldn't retrieve it. That's just off the top of my head a couple of things. So.
Thank you, Kyle. It was a good start. Questions? That's what we're here for. There we go. Let me get the speaker up here. There's the microphone.
So along the lines of security, what does your default firewall policies look like, and what services do you have bound to your global interfaces right off the bat on a default install?
Okay. Well, I mean...
And Kyle? Just a little higher.
Okay. Is this way better? Hello? Hello? Hey, everybody.
All right. So at least for me, I mean, one thing I liked about the default Ubuntu install is, you install things and pretty much nothing's listening. I mean, I guess if you tick off OpenSSH server, then that's listening, right? But for the most part, things aren't really listening, and then UFW makes it really easy to block things that you don't really care about too much. For me personally, what I like to do is there's certain services, especially if you're doing some sort of thing where you have like Nginx or Apache in front of an application, that's open to the world, and I really try to have the application itself either listen on localhost or use a Unix socket or something like that. If I can, that's even better. But sometimes for troubleshooting, it's easier to, it's listening on localhost a certain port. You can do monitoring. It's a little bit easier. So that's the thing I try to do is if I know that no external service, like an internal service to that server, I try to just have it listen on localhost whenever possible. And then otherwise, as far as firewall rules, I mean, again, most of my stuff's in the cloud, so firewall rules are a little weird because I don't know what my IP, I'm not using VPC, for instance, so I don't know what my IP is going to be. So I rely a little bit more heavily on what in a traditional network would be, firewall rules between VLANs. So we segregate things based on role and then decide what server role A needs to talk to server role B or not. That's the bulk of it. I mean, I don't do anything weird like port knocking or anything like that.
Next question.
And this could be any topic. It doesn't have to be security.
No, it could be anything. Think about that. All these people, any question. Okay.
When is UFW no longer a good choice if you as you scale up, or is it in more enterprise situations? And what would you move to?
Hi, everybody. So I guess if you're starting to do, I mean, the whole idea behind that is to make it easy to describe human-readable firewall rules that, so that I guess over time, like anything, you can climb the learning curve of IP tables just like you can climb the learning curve of everything else. But when you look at a lot of people will have their, I just run this to harden my stuff, and you see this line noise of IP tables rules that, to me, simpler is better in most of those cases. So I try to make that stuff super simple. The same thing with access control lists in general. Like a lot of people can go crazy with access control lists just in general. And the problem is auditing that after the fact and what you believe is happening versus what's actually happening in practice. And firewall rules are the same way with me. Like I try to keep it super simple. So I guess if you're starting to do things like fancy things in IP tables where you're doing a lot of crazy pre-routing rules or dumping copies of packets to a different location, things like that. But for the most part, I just keep it kind of vanilla. So it doesn't really help you. But yeah, I try to keep it simple and trying to get too crazy with IP tables.
Next question. Oh, please. Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, I have a question. Marco, you were here last year. What's your job title at Canonical? What are you working on?
Hey, everybody. Hello.
Hey, there we go. I'm not Navy.
Hello? Oh, goodness.
There's some flowers in that one.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, hey, I'm Marco Ceppi. I work on the Juju Solutions team, so I work with Juju Cloud, making stuff, orchestrating stuff, etc.
Will you be talking with George?
No, George. Oh, later this week, yes. Okay. Tomorrow. Not today, though. He's on his own today.
George has hung out to dry on his own today.
Hey, I just finished my slides, so I'm good.
Jill, what do you do at Canonical?
I am on our new BootStack team. We offer a managed OpenStack solution where if you want to have a cloud, you want to start working with OpenStack, but you don't have the internal knowledge to set one up and run it. We will actually come out and help you set up on-premise on your own hardware and then run a working OpenStack that when you are ready, when you have people trained up or hired, we'll hand you the keys that you can take over and keep operating it.
Nice. That's a new thing.
I'll bet that's very popular.
So everyone's like, oh man, I want OpenStack. It's so awesome. And then like, it's like, well, how far did you get? And they're like, well, we tried for like 6 months and we got like one thing running. But OpenStack is actually like 75 billion services put together. But everyone says they want OpenStack, right? It's really a collection of a bunch of things, right? So people just started telling us, they're like, well, you guys know how to do OpenStack in production. I mean, we've been running it, since the beginning. And we dog food all our own stuff, so they're like, can I just pay you to run my own OpenStack? And then once I hire somebody, then I get stuff back. And we're like, okay, we could make money doing this. So how much does it cost, do you know?
It is $15 a day per $15 a day per physical host. And we can have that up and running and ready to hand to you potentially within a couple of days.
I can afford that. We'll talk.
And that is HA configuration. So you're going to have HA on all of your Neutron, Nova controller, all that stuff.
That is way cool.
Right.
And you're new here. How long have you been here?
Since October.
That's awesome.
We have
And
a question.
I think we're pretty dang cool. So.
I just met you.
I have a question for George. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized juju terms or one horse-sized juju term?
I don't even know what that means.
Good.
It's a question.
Good. 100 duck-sized.
Somebody, you can see where these questions have descended. It is up to you to save us. Thank you. Stop the descent. Ask a real question. Thank you.
No, you can't ask questions. Why not? Because.
All right, for those of us who are not familiar with UFW, how does it vary from IP tables?
You can ask that question.
You want me to go? So, I grew up in the 90s with Linux and stuff, and I actually am embarrassed that, like, some of the things I've written with IP tables in the past, like, where you're like, wow, the only thing worse than this is, like, one of Kyle's regular expressions. So, like, so UFW is just an easy front-end wrapper to IP tables. So if you're a Linux sysadmin, you're a pro. I'm not saying, use UFW or whatever, right? But for a guy like me, right, I come to a conference, I can type, UFW disable all or whatever the actual command. I don't even know, because I don't have to, because I type UFW hit tab and it's got autocompletion. It's badass, right? So the idea is like, if you know your IP tables, foo or whatever, that doesn't really go away. But it's like just a simple wrapper that, I give it the service name and I want it on or off, or, I'm going to a conference, make sure that you drop everything or whatever without me actually having to remember, because I forgot all this stuff, how to, like, oh no, like, for example, I'm giving a demo, so I wanted to have my firewall on, but I want one port open so my demo works, right? And I was like, oh man. So it's a nice little command line tool, but
so a follow up to that. Does UFW manipulate IP tables?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's all it does. It's a little wrapper. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Next question.
Kind of two questions. one is NF tables, right? That's the next big thing. Is that working with that as well?
I think. Oh, I can find out.
We have the internet.
He's literally Googling that for you right now.
In the back end, but UFW itself will still.
Okay. Yeah, and I know there's backwards compatibility for IP tables in NF tables as well. So maybe that's what it's doing. I don't know. Down the line, systemd changes. What does that look like? What are some of the hurdles going to be? Have you guys? How's that looking?
So I believe that the goal. Well, I just happened to hang out with Sing Langasac like last week, so I asked them, "How's the systemd thing coming along?" And I think so. Feature Freeze was today. I think it's already booting, right? Put your microphone up. Oh, I think it's already booting, right? Oh. It is booting. So yeah, we're almost done. Yeah, for the one in April, right? Exactly.
Right. We hit feature freeze on 15.04 this week, so if it's not in there now, it'll be next one probably.
And
yeah, but the idea was to switch to it earlier, so we have it in for a few normal releases before the next LTS.
Is this primarily just as the init system, or also taking over logging, UDEV, all that stuff as well? And
I think it's just about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the goal is to replace everything that Upstart did, plus whatever other stuff, new nice stuff that systemd is bringing in.
Right.
Yeah, which is everything.
Yeah. So, sorry, I don't have much detail, but the great thing about that is with so many Ubuntu developers being Debian developers as well, It's really nice. It's a nice area of collaboration that we're kind of like I think they updated to version 2.19 at the same time, and Pity put in Debian and Ubuntu like at the same time and stuff. So it's really cool that that's a place where we can not have a diff with Debian, which I think is always a good engineering win. So that's really cool as well. So sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Every room I walk into, all I hear is containerization, C groups. I hear Docker, you name it. But that's all sort of userland stuff. That's like my application is going to run in containers. Is it having any impact at all on sort of core OS distribution? Are you thinking, is anybody at Ubuntu thinking about wrapping up some of the services that might be vulnerable to attack in containers, just so that when you distribute the system, it's safer?
Do we have any Snappy experts up here?
No, he was supposed to be here. I can take it.
I have some limited Snappy experience.
Yes.
So, I can't hear myself. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So basically, the way Snappy works. So, what happened with the phones is that they went to image-based systems, and so it's the actual system file system is read-only, and so to affect that, they have what are called click packages, and so they come in and they install in your home folder, and they don't touch the system file system. And so, based on the success of that, Canonical was able to have a snappy Ubuntu core, which is a really tiny core Ubuntu server that's an image that's read-only, and so snappy packages kind of install. And so one thing they did for the phone, because they wanted to have quick upload and no manual review and no malware and not this Android permission soup where everything wants 20 permissions. You click OK, you don't care because you don't read them all. So every Ubuntu phone app, for example, is sandboxed using AppArmor. They can't access other applications files. They can only access their one directory. They're all self-contained. And so that technology and that proving ground also went to Snappy. So the apps themselves can be sandboxed. And Canonical is looking at working with hardware partners and discussing how to sandbox things in hardware as well, is what they've said. So interestingly enough, the phone story sort of led to this protection on servers as well.
Marco, you had something to add?
No, that was perfect.
I just wanted to add that if you do have a Docker container, one of the concerns that you have is how do you keep the content of the container itself up to date? How do you update the OS and the app in there? And that's another thing that Snappy provides. So if you have a Docker container image that you built using Ubuntu Core and Snappy, then you can easily go in there and update the app or the OS independently of each other to keep them up to date with any security improvements or fixes that come in.
Right. So one thing we've been doing to support containerization better is, thank you. So we are now very aggressively bringing upstream versions of Docker back into the backports channel, right? Because Docker moves so fast that that really sucks to have a version that's 6 months old. As far as the reason you were asking, are containers kind of changing the way that we're thinking about making the operating system, right? So if you look at it, it's like I really just want a shim that runs a bunch of containers on it, right? So I can get that scale, 10,000 containers in one machine or whatever it is, right? That's exactly kind of the problem that Snappy was made to solve, right? So you install Snappy on your hardware or whatever. First thing you do is you say Snappy install Docker, and then we'll handle everything else, and then you just toss your Docker containers at it, and you'll be good to go. On top of that, so Docker is great for application containers, right? It's however you ship your bits, it's really great at that. However, some people, right? I don't know how many you sat in on the Docker or the container panel or whatever, right? And they said, one thing that bothers me is everyone thinks containers are just lightweight VMs. They're not that, right? Like if someone tells you that's what they are, so that's what LXD is, right? Which is built on LXC, which is really kind of giving people the benefits of containers without the VM overhead. But it's not an application container, right? Because that's a different use case, right?
So we like the portability of Docker, the isolation, and all that stuff. But sometimes you need something to SSH into, right? Like that use case for certain users never really goes away. So what we do is we give you, hey, you can run LXD if you want, kind of traditional stuff, but you want the benefits of containers, or Docker, right? They're not competitors, right? They solve two separate problems. So that's really good as well. And as far as working with the Docker guys, something I think over 75% of all the Docker registry images are from Ubuntu they start with. I mean, it's a lot. So we recognize that. We're really fortunate that a ton of this innovation happens on Ubuntu, which we think is awesome because it enabled them to do really cool things. So yes, containers are on our mind like every day, every single day.
We have a question from Brian.
Actually, just a comment.
Oh.
I mean, obviously, you keep up on all the trades. Every OS manufacturer is talking about containerization, compartmentalization, and all the things that go with it. And really, I can't imagine whether or not someone can talk about it with or within their NDA. I can't imagine they're not looking at it and looking at the success that Docker has had in a very short time, and not immediately want to, if you will, gravy train on top of that. So I think we're probably going to see in the next couple of years, I have no idea what they have planned, but most of the OS people are going to go into some sort of containerization system, even for a desktop application, because it only makes sense.
Sure. The question was, can you compare Snappy to Ubuntu Cloud?
Sure. So Snappy basically does one thing right now: install snap packages, and that's basically it, right? It like boots, and that's all it's designed to do, right?
And update them.
What?
And it'll update them.
Oh, and it'll update them, yes. And then reboot. That's like, okay, it does three things. And then really the only thing useful right now that you put is you Snappy install Docker, and then you do the containers like I said before. The Ubuntu Cloud image is like a traditional OS, very stripped down, right? So when you boot on Amazon, that image that you're booting or whatever is not the same thing that we put on the CD, right? So that's a traditional image. So when you log into a Snappy system and you're like, oh, okay, apt-get update, and there's no apt, right? It's a totally different model. So what I like to tell people is, if you're the kind of place that has like a microservices-based architecture where you have tens of thousands of things and rebooting 10% of them every hour until the thing updates and stuff is your thing, then yeah. What I'm telling enthusiasts like myself, like, you're not going to go home and reformat your home server and run Snappy on it. That's just, to get transactional-based updates, you kind of have to break with the past, and that's really, really cool. However, we also want the option to not throw away 25 years of Debian-based knowledge, right? So we consider Snappy to be just like another option, just like the cloud image is a separate option than from like the traditional ISO, right? Same Ubuntu, just different flavor, I guess. The cloud images, depending on where you go, are slightly different. So when you boot a cloud image in Amazon, right, all the mirrors are local to Amazon stuff for that region, right? If you boot a similar image on Azure, right, those are pointing to those mirrors, or on HP Cloud or whatever. So technically they are the same image, but we build them specifically for certified public clouds. And that's kind of a commercial agreement between us, and Amazon, and to provide you with a service that's always awesome, right? It would really suck if every single Ubuntu image on Amazon went to updates.ubuntu.com or whatever, right? When it's sitting there locally. So what's really nice about that is that's integrated with our release process. So as part of releasing Ubuntu, we publish into those public clouds, into all of the regions and things like that. And if you're looking at cloud images, you definitely want to look at Cloud Init. It lets you use user data. Before you boot, you can send it a whole bunch of parameters and do a whole bunch of custom stuff, which is really cool.
Now, if you're going to use user data, a really common, if we're going to go back to security a little bit, a lot of people, it's very easy to dump secrets in your user data script because you're trying to do some sort of bootstrap. You have some sort of gigantic post-install script that you had back in the olden days when that's how you, before configuration management, and that's how you set up everything, right? You have this gigantic bash script that's ridiculous. But what a lot of people do, it's very easy to forget that whatever's in that user data script is any user on the system can now get it via an API call. So don't put any secrets in there, basically. Don't put, if you have SSH private keys, for instance, who knows why you would do that, but if you did that, or anything, or other, like, I'm going to dump all of my cloud API secrets in there so it makes it easy to do X, Y, and Z. Anything you put in there, any person who has a shell on that machine, they don't have to be root, can perform an API call and pull it down. So just something to keep in mind.
We have a question back here.
Yeah, just to go back to what you were talking about, what are you using to build and configure and package the AMIs that you distribute in the different regions?
So you're talking about what the packages that we build for the cloud images for each specific cloud?
Yeah, the separate AMI images that you're actually building and configuring, and then packaging as AMIs in this case, or potentially packaging as in some other format.
Right. So we not me, the cloud team that does this, our CPC team, they're actually rolling cloud images about every 2 weeks. So it's the same Ubuntu with all the updates applied. So when you get a cloud image, you get a far less rejection. Is it daily?
But we don't point people to the daily.
Oh, we don't publish them daily, but we do release about every 2 weeks. I know we use Jenkins to build these images and publish them to each cloud directly. I think the majority of it isn't actually package-based. It's simply a configuration that we dump inside of the template that says, here's where these mirrors are being pointed to. So it's an actual customization of the ISO or whatever we're actually delivering, QRAW, the QCal file. I'm not sure exactly what the format is, to each cloud vendor directly. But we're not actually, the cloud image you download is the same cloud image that we're delivering to them. We're simply having additional configuration. You want to think of it as a preceded cloud init file almost. That's running, that's setting the configuration for mirrors and other things that apply for that cloud specifically.
And I guess what I was asking was still like how you're actually creating that image, like you're using what tools, Bootstrap or.
Oh, I have no clue. I know we're using Jenkins behind the scenes to build all this stuff.
It's
I'm not
most
sure
likely
the
using
process.
the same thing we use for like the desktop ISOs, where we're using seed files and just downloading the packages from the archives and putting them all together.
Yeah, because I see the manifest files in the directory.
So even with like Snappy and Ubuntu Core and image-based updates on the phone, we still use apt and dpackage to build those images in the first place.
Okay, I'm wondering why are the pictures for like the Ubuntu California community uploaded to Flickr and not an Ubuntu server with like a gallery in the repos?
That's a good question. So why do we use Flickr to upload community services? So the problem when you have any sort of advocacy is that you need to reach out to more than just the really big enthusiasts. So while Flickr is proprietary, on the other hand, it's the most popular photo sharing service out there. So the way you get these things searchable, the way you get those pictures out to the most amount of people is through Flickr. And then from there, you can retweet them. You can we have a Facebook page we share to. There's been talks about Meetup. So we want to when we use Twitter, we also use Identica, which I'm not sure anyone's using anymore. We always want to have free services and open platforms, but you also have to extend your reach out into sort of the proprietary waters. So it's really about access and audience and accessibility.
I will just add to that the Loco team portal, loco.ubuntu.com, has the ability to pull pictures from Flickr. So if a Loco team posts pictures of one of their events on there, it can show up on that team's page on that portal. So that's another good reason to use Flickr.
If we don't have another question right now, I have one for Jose. You're doing a talk with George on Juju? Okay, I'm a complete ignoramus. Can you tell us in just a few words what Juju is and why we want to go and learn more about it?
So, hello everyone. Juju is an orchestration service for the cloud. That may sound a little bit complicated, but so what Juju actually does is it deploys, configures, and manages services for you. So let's say you want to have a WordPress server into your into your AWS account. You just fire a couple commands on your command line, or you install a GUI, and do a couple of things on the GUI, and you will get a fully working WordPress instance in a matter of minutes. And you do not have to access the server, edit files, run commands. It's just 2 or 3 commands, and you get a fully working service up in the cloud that can be scaled, can be managed, and configured by Juju. So why would I want to use Juju? Is because it's fast, it will let you configure the services, and it will let you scale the services up. So if I have a WordPress instance, if I want a WordPress instance, first I deploy MySQL, I deploy WordPress, I relate those two because each service is isolated, and we will have a fully working WordPress instance in around 5 minutes or less. And then if I get thousands of visits a day in my WordPress machine, then I want to scale it up, I can just add some more units, and it will be using the same database, same configuration, everything. And in just a matter of minutes, you will be able to keep using your WordPress site without crashing, because you can just add some more units. And if you do not need them anymore, you can just remove those units, and you're saving up on cloud costs.
Good summary. Thank you. A brief note for those of you who weren't here in this morning. Jose is the organizer for UbuCon LA, which is UbuCon Latino America. It's taking place in Lima, Peru this year in late summer. So if you may be in that neighborhood and want to check out the other UbuCon that happens, one of the 4 that happen worldwide, you can usually see Jose at the Ubuntu booth downstairs. Is that right? You'll be there?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
I was going to ask the hard question.
Okay. What's the hard question?
Give me that. This question is from Michael Hall. So what's the deal with the Amazon Lens and all this stuff? What are we doing with this? Why do people hate me? I don't even work on that stuff. Tell me what's the plan with scopes and online. Explain to me, what gets sent where. Just explain this to me.
Okay. So the plan is to.
Oh, that guy doesn't care. I'm out of here.
He works for Amazon.
And really, a lot of people didn't care. There was some people that cared a lot, but the majority of people didn't care. But what we did find, even for the people who didn't care about the integrated Amazon stuff, is that it didn't actually work the way we wanted it to work. People didn't find information that they wanted with that system. And so with Unity 8 that we've got on the phone now, we've drastically changed the way that works. So there's no longer a one search that will search all of them. So now we still have an Amazon scope on there. It's still installed by default. But you don't search that unless you go to the Amazon scope and type in your search there. So your search is only going to what you're looking at on the phone at that point in time instead of going to everything. And then we made it more customizable for the user. What's actually on the dash? What's easily accessible? What's the first thing that they get to when they hit the big circle of friends button? Mm-hmm. So all of the controls there, you search just what you want.
Okay.
But you can't still search Amazon to buy worms because some people do that.
I don't use it because it doesn't work. If I actually type Metallica album or whatever, and I actually got the Metallica album, but it doesn't do that.
Which Metallica album?
It's what?
Yeah, Musicland.
Yeah. Musicland. Yeah.
George, you know all the keystrokes. What's the keystroke to switch between the default lens and the app lens and the music lens?
So Super A.
Super A for apps.
Apps, right?
Super M for music.
Okay.
Right.
Super F for files.
What's the super key again? For those people who don't know.
The Windows key.
Or the command key.
Or if you bought a proper laptop, it's the Ubuntu key.
Or if you drop by the System 76 booth, Reason booth, a few others, you can get little stickers to cover the logo of the other operating system with the logo for a real operating system.
But those come off easily, so it's really just easier to buy a new System
They'll give you a sheet.
laptop.
I have one, and it's held up very well. The one on my laptop's been there for 2.5 years.
Yeah, actually, System 76 doesn't have a booth at SCaLE this year, but they did donate laptops for the Ubuntu booth. So the 3 laptops we have are System 76 systems. They're all running Ubuntu. I think they're running Trusty. So you can look at the beautiful keyboard, including the Ubuntu logo super key. So while you ponder how much you want to buy one of those, in the meantime, while you're waiting for it to ship, you can, we'll give you some stickers so you can cover the super.
We can probably quiz the audience and give them stickers.
I can add a little bit to that, security-wise. Buying for System 76, one of the things that we do is keep our images extremely up to date. So that means when you get a laptop, it's not, open it up and install 3 months of upgrades. It's open it up and just use it, because the image was actually provisioned the night before it shipped. So that's one of the things we try to keep up with, security updates and updates not only for vulnerabilities, but just for easy use for users. And Ubuntu keys are something we're actually really proud of. It took us years to manufacture those things, and now we have, because we needed all the quantity, you have to manufacture like 10,000 of them to do it. So now we have backlit Ubuntu keys, and it's something we're pretty proud of. And when you press the Ubuntu key, it does what the Ubuntu button does. So there's a nice holistic experience there.
Every reviewer worth his or her salt notes that about your keys. They're not a stick-on. It's something you guys have really cared about at that level of detail.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Brian, and I'm a GNOME user.
Hi, Brian. It's okay. We accept you.
I've used since version 2 of GNOME, and I've become quite accustomed to it. And Unity seems like it's a really wonderful place to go, but I'm not there yet, and I'm far more comfortable in GNOME. Now, I know you have different versions, but long term, am I going to eventually be forced to migrate away from GNOME?
Can I do this one?
Are you asking Carl about his laptop specifically? Or
no,
as long as
the laptop is interesting, but also the development of GNOME is critical right now, and I'm curious where you guys stand.
Well, may I point out one thing? I've been watching him during this talk, and I'm pleased to report we have a one-person install fest happening live. This was a Windows laptop when it entered the room. He now has one of our CDs that were donated here by Nathan, was in use. He now has Trusty running on here right now. In Unity. I can get you my best effort at answering that, and you can fill in with details that I might miss, is GNOME is still available in the Software Center. So you can find it, you can download it, log out, log in and choose that, and that's what you have. Yeah. So it's that easy to have it. And
I understand that. I've actually run GNOME on Ubuntu for quite some time. But my question is still, long term, what's going to happen with that relationship? Will I eventually have to either switch away from GNOME to Unity, or will I continue to be able to enjoy GNOME and Ubuntu together?
You will continue to be able to enjoy GNOME as long as somebody is developing GNOME.
Okay, but you guys are not going to be involved in that?
We will be involved as far as supporting our flavors. So is Ubuntu GNOME an official flavor now?
Yeah, this is our first cycle.
So we will provide support for them, and I think make CD spins and stuff for them, like we do for Kubuntu and Ubuntu. And yeah, we're committed to those relationships. So as long as there's somebody there willing to actually put in the work to make that experience good, then we're going to support them as a flavor.
And it will actually get better because we're still in that awkward phase where Unity 7 was based on GTK technologies. So we had to freeze the version that we could do. So if you wanted GNOME, you'd end up with an older version of GNOME, which is weird because Ubuntu, that was one of the best things about it, right? You always got the fresh GNOME and it was good. So now that Unity's moving to a Qt base, that allows the Ubuntu GNOME team to keep GTK more fresh and more upstream in Ubuntu GNOME. So I'm actually thinking it's going to get actually a lot better.
Yeah. In the past 2 years, it's gotten quite a bit better already.
Right. There was that weird 1104. She was kind of I don't want to talk about 1104.
The 1104 in the pre-Unity, it was kind of like you were brothers and you were in a fight.
I sympathize. I was on the GNOME Foundation board. The next cycle, I'm like Unity.
And one thing to remember is that the more that Ubuntu does its own thing with Unity, the less it has to mess with GNOME to achieve what. So an Ubuntu disk should be simple, one solution, beautiful, looks good, polished, and that can lead to a lot of changes in whatever you're using, GNOME, for example. So one of the nice things about Ubuntu and Debian is that you can install all these desktop environments side by side. So there's so we would have to work really hard to make it difficult to install GNOME, and that's more work for us. We have no interest in that. The other nice thing is that if you have seen Unity and you say, oh, big icons and mouse-based and it's horrible, Unity is actually the best power user keyboard-only interface I have ever used in my life. So super key, you do searches. If you hold down the super key, you get a list of keyboard shortcuts. It's like Super 1 gives you File, Super 2 gives you Firefox. And the best thing of all is if you're using LibreOffice or GIMP or Inkscape or anything else with evil menus, you can tap the Alt key and you get a HUD comes up, it's a menu search. You just type in the command you want. So if you type in blur in GIMP, it shows you it says blur, Gaussian blur, pixelized, all the blur filters that it matched in the menu are right there, and you're all set. Or if you're looking to format something in LibreOffice, you tap Alt, you type in the command, the thing that you want to do. You don't have to dig through the menus, the format is the tools, if you want autocorrect, it's right there. So Unity is, if you're stuck with Unity, try it out. Use it keyboard only. You might find that. I guess the other thing is that Alt Tab switches windows, right? Alt tilde, the key above Tab, switches between windows of the current app. So you have 2, 3 terminal windows open. Alt tilde just flips to the terminal. So if you haven't been thrilled with Unity, try because you're an advanced user, try it with the keyboard only. I've never been more efficient and more happy.
Kyle's like, I'm a Tally-1 manager. I knew it.
No, it has nothing to do with it. I just realized, like, the most obvious security thing that I didn't mention at the very beginning that everyone, because most of my stuff is like, if you're in the cloud, do this. The easiest thing to do that out of the box an Ubuntu server allows password SSH, because that's a very useful thing for some people. But the biggest thing I would advise you to do is to break yourself of that and immediately just like push up a key and use SSH key-based authentication for everything, and then immediately disable passwords.
And give you tools by default that do that. Yeah.
And disable root logon via
well,
SSH.
isn't that all? That's by default, right?
Yeah.
Is it now?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, so depending, just check your SSH config to make sure that it's off, that root login's off by default, and then always check, and then push. Ideally, that would be in the configuration manager if we're talking about servers, and that would just enforce that. But once you push keys, disable password off, because I hear all the time people saying, "Well, I just use failed to ban, and I can't believe how many attacks I'm getting all the time, and the world's a crazy place." And like, you don't need, if you're using keys, you don't have to care. No one's going to brute force your key. And so you don't have to care about all the millions of how the dirty internet sending like SSH brute force attempts on your servers anymore. It just takes one person in your network with a bad password, and you're done. So yeah, turn on keys, and then even better, turn on password off for those keys. Like not password off for the keys, but lock the keys when you're with the password when you generate them. Usually, like the lazy thing is you generate a key, then you just hit enter twice to skip through typing your password right, because you're like, that's more work. It's so sweet when I just say SSH server and I'm logged in right then. So you can get a similar thing with SSH agent, which pretty much everything has on now by default, where you add your key to RAM temporarily. So basically what I do is there's a command line tool, SSH add. In the morning when I get to work, I'm like, oh, it's 9 o'clock, it's 3 hours to lunch. I type SSH add space -t space 3h. So that basically says store my when I type in, you know how you type sudo and it remembers your password for 15 minutes or whatever? Same kind of thing for SSH key passwords. You type this in, it remembers it, in my case right now, for the next 3 hours. I'm using Get all the time that uses SSH. I'm SSHing the servers all the time. The next time I use that, whenever I do a git push or whatever and I get prompted for a password, I'm like, wait, it's lunchtime. All right, so now it's time to put the keyboard down, go get some lunch. I come back, type, and like how much time now before I need to go home? SSH add, and then that time period, right? So then work. And sometimes you get lost in work and like, oh man, my ferry's going to leave. I take the ferry into work, like my ferry's going to leave. Or just enforce some discipline, work-life balance, right?
You know, there's easier ways to set timers.
I'm on the keyboard, so if I have to like hit super 75 to do that, I'm not going to do that. So for me, I'm on the command line anyway, so I just type that. But I always set it for whenever I want to be. It's almost like a tea timer kind of thing for me, because like I have to type a password again. It must be time to go home or whatever.
SSH tea timer. That should be the blog post.
All right. There's also a couple other things.
I should note this before we go on, if I may, just because I want to be conscious of the rule I promised the attendees. It is technically into break time, and I want to be sensitive to George's time. So we can start George's in a few minutes. If you want to answer that, well, I just wanted to let people know we got it. Okay. Tip of the day. Last comment for now.
If anyone's using Launchpad or GitHub, I think the majority of people probably are using one of those two services, and you want to add your key or a friend's key or someone's key to a machine, you can type SSH-import-ID and either your GitHub username with a GitHub prefix or your Launchpad username, and it'll grab your public keys that you have added to those services and add them as access for that user on that machine. So at work all the time, when I want to give George access to my machine, which isn't actually very that often because I don't trust him with my machines, I can type SSH-import-ID jcastro, and suddenly he has access to shell into that machine as long as he can network to it.
Public IP address. I log in. It's safe, secure. It's nice.
That is very helpful.
You can add them and then do an job to remove the dev. You no longer have access to the server.
Okay, we're going to take a break so George can set up. But may I note one thing here? We had a plan, it failed. We had a backup plan, it failed. These people just happened to be in the room. They got roped into this panel discussion. Everybody had a meaningful contribution. Could you give them all a hand? All right, thank you, guys. So let's say that we'll start maybe 5 after. Give George time to set up. So take a little break, get some water, and we'll see you then.
Ubuntu server? My talk is next.
It is going to rock. Be here.